Welcome to Central News, I'm Amy Forrest. In today's news, Greaton's long-awaited new library is heading toward reality after Tauranga City Council agreed to the next step in the current process. Proceed to refine the costs of the preferred $3 million rebuild option. The Council Staff Task Force is to progress the next stage of the new library and report back to Council in June with more details in the final 2013-2014 annual plan. The preferred option is a 900 metres squared rebuild of the Greaton Library with the main entrance into the village square. The preferred option A differs from earlier option B by leaving the two council-owned neighbouring sections available for sale to defray costs. The task force attempted to save money by including the main structure of the existing building in the redevelopment, but was advised against it by Councillor Bill Faulkner, who says it will cost more in the long run than a complete rebuild. The Port of Tauranga handled some special cargo at the weekend as Emirates Team New Zealand America's Cup contender Aotearoa was transshipped through the port. The catamaran and its wings were transshipped from ports of Auckland on the Mers Jabal and reloaded onto the Pescara to be taken to Oakland in San Francisco Bay. Commercial manager Graham Marshall says despite the bad weather conditions, careful planning and strong communication between the teams ensured the transshipment operation was flawless. The draft strategy for the lakes of the Rotorua district has been released for public feedback. Rotorua Te Arawa Lake Strategy Group Chairman Kevin Winters said the strategy was an important part of protecting and restoring Rotorua's iconic lakes. He says the Rotorua Te Arawa lakes are so important for our region, historically, economically and culturally. The strategy sets out the vision for the lakes and provides steps on how to achieve that vision. The original strategy is more than 10 years old. While the vision remains as relevant today as it was in the past, many other things have changed. A refreshed strategy has been developed that retains the original vision but builds on the commitment of partner organisations to provide an integrated approach to managing the lakes and their catchments. Now for our region's weather. Sunny spells for you, Hamilton, with a high of 19 and a low of 12. And Tauranga, much the same for you, with cloudy periods, a high of 20 and a low of 14. Just ahead, the air quality in the Waikato. Welcome to Central News on TV Central. Waipa District will be the latest area in the Waikato region to have air quality monitoring devices installed. We found out more about Jonathan Caldwell's current role within the Waikato Regional Council. Hi Jonathan, now tell us about your recent project of air quality monitoring.
Okay, right. Well, just to provide a little bit of background, in the Waikato region we have 20 air sheds, and the air sheds are just a way that regional councils designate an area where they monitor and manage air quality. And in our region to date we have monitored 9 out of those 20 air sheds, and typically an air shed will have the same boundary as a urban town centre or urban area. Sometimes there's some differences from this, but in most cases in our region the airshed is defined by the town-urban boundary. Now we have, as to date, not actually monitored in the Waipa district yet, so part of our recent project is to start monitoring in 2 airsheds in that district, namely Te Awamutu and Cambridge. And so we're currently setting up air quality monitoring stations with monitoring equipment in both those airsheds.
So what specifically will the devices be monitoring in the air quality? Okay,
so the main contaminant of concern in our region and across the country is PM10. PM10 is a particle size 10 microns in diameter or smaller, and so it covers a range of particle sizes from 10 microns all the way to sub-micron size. Now just to give an analogy of how small that is, 10 microns is about 1/5 of a human hair fibre, And so a lot of these particles are a lot smaller than that again, so they're not visible to the human eye. PM10 has been ranked by the World Health Organization as the leading, or the 13th leading cause of mortality worldwide. And because of its smallness, the particles can get into the lungs and cause respiratory and cardiovascular health issues. So what we're going to be doing is monitoring for PM10. PM10 is usually most prevalent in our air sheds over the winter period as a result of domestic wood burning. So people burning wood to heat their homes causes our biggest air quality problem. And one way we can counteract that is to use clean heat sources, or choose to use a National Environmental Standard approved wood burner, which is designed to produce low emissions. You can also help by collecting your firewood in early, at least 6 months before the winter season, stacking it appropriately and making sure that it's dry before burning it. And in this way you can achieve much lower emissions. You'll save money by efficiently heating your home, and also preventing health issues for yourself and your neighbours.
And how do these devices work?
Okay, the devices that we use and we are installing in Te Awamutu in Cambridge are referred to as beta attenuation monitors, or BAMs, and they collect an air sample by sucking air through an inlet, and they filter out the large particles and just collect the smaller PM10 particles, and these are collected on a filter tape. And as the particles build up, an electron beam is passed through that filter tape, and less electrons can get through as more PM10 particles build up. And this gives us a measure of how much mass of PM10 is building up per cubic metre of air that's sucked through the device.
So what is your role within the Waikato Regional Council? Okay,
so my role is to oversee our air quality monitoring program. I coordinate where we're going to be monitoring, what contaminants we monitor for, and I collect the data and analyse it and provide reports each year on how air quality is tracking in all our air sheds. I provide updates to the Ministry for the Environment, and I also make sure that when we get exceedances of the standards for PM10 and other contaminants, that those exceedances are reported in public newspapers and on our website.
And has the monitoring been trialled in New Zealand before?
Yes, with the use of BAMs is well established in both New Zealand and overseas. We've been using BAMs in our region since about 2004. We've also been monitoring PM10 using other instruments since the late 1990s in Hamilton. So it's a reasonably established technique.
So it's been successful?
It has, yes, certainly has.
So tell me exactly what areas will be monitored and how these sites were selected.
Okay, so the two sites that we've selected in the Waipaha district, namely the Leamington Domain in Cambridge and Albert Park in Te Awamutu, were selected by undertaking a mobile monitoring program in 2012 over the winter period. And we drove around in a car at night time on many successive nights with a mobile monitoring equipment with a hose out the window sucking in air. And over successive nights we found the same hotspots occurring in the same places, and this is what led us to those areas.
And how much does this system cost?
Okay, so a typical BAM instrument will cost around about $25,000 to $30,000. However, what we're doing is taking out BAMs from two existing air sheds, namely Matamata and Ngaruawahia, where we've been monitoring for some years now and haven't found any issues there, and we're going to move that equipment to the two new sites. We have had about $15,000 to $20,000 worth of installation costs though, because we've had to set up a concrete pad for the enclosures, security fencing and electrical supply.
So once the data has been gathered in these areas, what happens next?
Okay, so the data is transmitted on an hourly basis to our database system at Regional Council. We then update the data on a daily basis on our website, so people can check our website on a daily basis to see how air quality is tracking in their neighbourhood. And we also provide an annual report each year which analyses the data for all our air sheds, and that's also on our website.
So can you explain the process of the devices, how they work?
Okay, so the devices, which are referred to as BAMs, basically suck air in from the surrounding air, and they separate out the large particles from the small particles, and it's the small particles, the PM10, that are measured by their build-up on a filter tape, and that is compared with how many electrons can be transmitted through that filter tape. And as the PM10 builds up, less electrons can pass through, and that gives you a measure of how much PM10 is in the air.
For more information, visit waikatoregion.gov.nz. Up next, the Local Government Reform Bill. Welcome back. The Local Government Reform Bill is well underway, and we have put together a local government reform special for you. We have asked all the mayors and chairmans of our regions for their opinion on some of the changes made to the Local Government Act, and we will be bringing you an interview every night for the next couple of weeks. Tonight we hear from Ross Patterson.
There are different schools of thought on what the purpose of local government is. What do you think the purpose of local government is?
I believe we were at a stage where we really needed to look at what was the job description around there and what was the responsibilities of local government and the efficiencies within there, and trying to drive some efficiencies through there. So that was my two main drivers that I took out of why we need to get into local government better reform.
Part of the Local Government Reform Bill is to reduce spending and public debt of the last decade. What is your council doing to ensure that you stay out of debt?
Okay, well, we've been a growth community for 15 years. We've had solid growth. We have put in 5 wastewater schemes, 3 water schemes, some strategic roading for the largest port in New Zealand, and some stormwater work. So we do have debt. We will be using debt for intergenerational repayment, spreading that forward over 25 or longer years. So we're not in a hurry to actually reduce debt. We see debt as part of our structure and need it just like businesses do, people do when they buy houses, that same sort of thing. So we have debt. It is prudent the way we're managing it, and we see it as part of developing our infrastructure of the area.
Do you think an amalgamation of the councils, like in Auckland, would actually benefit your ratepayers?
That's a very big topic. The regional area of the Bay of Plenty is vastly different to Auckland, where Auckland was 7 cities, very common base, whereas you've got one large city, you've got another inland city, you've got smaller towns, and you've got a large rural horticultural and pastoral area. Very different mix. So it's not going to be the same as Auckland putting it together. Also, in the Bay of Plenty, we already have collaboration. Auckland couldn't talk to each other. We have no problem talking to each other and well down the track of knowing what others are doing and trying to get efficiencies out of it that way.
Do you think an amalgamation actually runs the risk of losing local representation?
It runs the risk of not having the people to be able to do the work, to do the job. When you put a business like ours, $80 to $100 million turnover a year, in, and you might have a regional type council, we probably have about 2 on that council. That is a big responsibility for those 2 to cover that work, to monitor and make certain that everything's right for their area. So I think it does lack numbers. We need numbers to be able to get credible results out at the end of the day.
What are some of the factors that you think have contributed to the rate increases since 2003 nationally?
We've had very high increases in oil prices, global prices, so that drives a lot of the products that we need for infrastructure development, oil, cement, concrete, steel, and even some of that flows through into wages as well. So there has been a big increase in energy costs, oil costs, and those all are part of what we do out there. And that is one of the big main drivers that I've seen that has come through bringing those costs up since 2003.
The Labour Cost Index shows local government costs rising over the past 3 years at nearly double the rate of the core state sector. What percentage of increases has your council had in their rates?
On wages, we've flatlined. We've made a serious look at our cost structures in the last 3 years and have taken out $3.5 million of costs. That has been at the expense of jobs, some people's jobs, and there have been 1 or 2 redundancies. However, we needed to do that in the downturn from the global financial crisis. Usually our rate increases run at about the low 4s to the high 4s, somewhere in the 4%. Pretty average run-of-the-mill. And our ratepayers are saying to us now, you have a certain amount of money from us, use it and use it wisely, and don't come back and ask for more.
The inflation and population rate of an area will limit expenditure growth under the new reform bill. How will this affect the Western Bay District Council?
We are still a growth centre going forward. A lot of areas are actually static or going to have falling populations. So we will have some growth. But the criteria around population and growth doing the work is now very much into communication, good process. If we've got anything over and above the norm, we will be going out to our communities, talking to them about that and making them well aware of it and working our way through it. I think the thing that's going to come out of it is good communication and working back with your communities. That's where local government's going to go in the future.
What about greenhouse gases?
I think we've got a role to play as a land use there. Some areas of decisions that central government should make on greenhouse gases could say that we need to plant trees or have a role in that respect. So I think we need to be a facilitator and understand, but the actual boundaries of it and what is there needs to be done by central government.
And child abuse?
No, that's a social cost and very much one of central government. I know it has come to us in violence and all those areas as the port of last call, but really central government needs to step up and take their responsibilities on those areas.
Up next, Yom HaShoah Day. If you've just joined us, welcome to Central News. Yom HaShoah, also known as Holocaust Remembrance Day, was commemorated in Hamilton with a special ceremony and tree planting. Dennis McLeod tells us more.
So first of all, what is Yom HaShoah Day?
Yom HaShoah Day it means the day of terror. In English, the Holocaust. It's a day when the Jewish people stopped to remember the people who died during that period of time in their history.
So when is this day held, and is it a worldwide day of remembrance?
It's normally held about the 7th or 8th of April. It's all the Jewish people throughout the world will celebrate it. Now many Christians over the years have also come on board to support the Jewish people on this day that happened, and we didn't do enough to stop it.
So how is this day commemorated in Israel?
In Israel, it's rather interesting to be in Israel on this day. The siren goes about 11 o'clock, and I saw a YouTube the other day, and all the traffic comes to a stop. Wherever they are, they come to a stop, even on the motorways. And they get out of their cars and stand by their cars for the time of that siren sounding. And when the siren sounds, I think it's a minute or 2 minutes, they all get back into their cars and the traffic continues.
And can you tell us about the recent ceremony here in Hamilton?
At the end of last year, I felt that we should be planting a tree here with the Jewish people to remember this day of the Holocaust. And so I contacted the Jewish Society and the City Council, and it was decided to plant a tree here in Memorial Park, because this obviously is the memorial for the war times. And from that, of course, we then planted a liquid amber tree in remembrance of the Jewish people who died, but also all the others who also died in the Holocaust, including those who died putting their lives in front of the Jewish people to try and save them. And so it took place here last Sunday, and it was quite a good turnout of people.
So who was present on this day?
There was quite a list of people who were invited by ourselves, the Christian Friends of Israel, and the Jewish Society. They ranged from the Mayor of Hamilton, also Mr. Teddy Poplinger from the Israeli Embassy in Wellington, Mr. Schultz from the Holocaust Memorial in Wellington, the local Komata, race relations gentleman from Auckland, Mr. Peter Rickman, the Reverend Peter Rickman from the St. Peter's Cathedral, and Mr. Len Naps from the RSA, and the Interfaith Council were also invited to attend. And also the 3 local MPs, Mr. Bennett, Mr. McIndoe and Ms. Maloney, they were all attending.
And tell us about the planting of the tree.
It was decided that 2 of the children would unveil the plaque, but we invited the Mayor of Hamilton, Mr. Poplinger, Race Relations Officer, and them to actually plant the tree. But the 2 young children, unveiled the plaque that illustrated exactly what the tree was all about.
Now, who organised this ceremony and why in Hamilton?
Well, Christian Friends of Israel is based here in Hamilton. We are the directors of that organisation, that ministry in Jerusalem for the whole of New Zealand. And also the Jewish Society came alongside, so between the 2 of us we organised this day.
So how many victims were murdered in the Holocaust of World War II?
The total number of Jewish people is not totally known, but they estimate approximately 6 million. But there are also 5 million other people who were just being different, were also killed.
And why do you think it is so important to remember those victims who perished all those years ago?
It is important because they no longer have a voice. They cannot tell of the terror that they suffered as they were dragged through the streets, as their weak and old were shot before their very eyes, as they were pushed onto carriages where there wasn't enough room for the dead and dying to fall to the floor, where the children were ripped from their parents' arms and they had to go through selection processes of who would live and die. They cannot tell of the horror that they must have suffered as they were crammed into a chamber, expecting a shower but got gas, and for the way they would have screamed, as they did, and it's recorded, and reached for the last bits of air that they could. And so if we don't remember them, those who are now gone, their cry would be lost into history and it could be repeated again.
How do you think this might help those find peace over what happened?
A lot of Jewish people think they stand alone, even today, after so many years have passed since the Holocaust. So for them to realise there are people, Christians, standing with them, helping them to come to terms in many ways, just being with them, hearing their stories as we do in Israel and Jerusalem, and just them knowing that there's love of the general populace around that supports them in what they went through and their time now of their suffering in this day.
That is the news for today. We really want you to be involved, so like us on Facebook and let us know your views. If you have any news, including your own video and photos, go to our website and hit upload. Those for your stories from our region. I'm Amy Forrest. Have a lovely evening.
This has been an Alpha Media production, a division of Television Media Group.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.